Hello, my name is Kuba Kucharski and this is the Dev Team Project, a podcast exploring methods, approaches and skills needed to build great engineering teams. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Dev Team Project. It's a beautiful day here in Santa Clara. We're sitting in Malwarebytes office with Darren Chinen, former head of data science at GoPro and big data architect at Apple, currently senior director of data science and engineering. Darren is this type of the guy that you want to just talk for hours. I actually think that our first conversation that we had would already be a great episode for Dev Team Project. I can't wait to dive into your world more, Darren. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with your background, with your story.
Sure. So unfortunately, my kids tell me I'm very old. I've been in data. That's where I kind of grew up. I was a data guy, really building out data warehouses and analytics and the old OLAP cubes. Excuse me. And I was really kind of happy on that journey for quite a while, managing data warehouses, managing analytics teams. And I got this really cool opportunity at Apple. And at Apple, that's really where my career really diversified. Mm-hmm. Because I was hired there to sort of build out the Apple online store, sales and support data warehouse, and analytics. Helped out with a couple of other areas like reseller operations. And then I had a very, very cool, unique opportunity that was presented to me. Apple, back in 2012, was really trying to form a data science organization. And they did that and had a fantastic team, mostly out of Austin. Amazingly smart people. And they needed a data platform to actually perform all of their experiments on. And so they came to the Global Business Intelligence. I was one of the dev managers there and architects. And we ended up trying to build them a data platform on Teradata. And I don't know if you know what building the cost of building a Bayesian model on Teradata is millions of dollars.
Oh wow!
So we ended up being one of the first adopters in at least in the global business intelligence area to adopt Hadoop. And from there, my career really it really diversified. And I really got very deep into both the data world and the software engineering world too, right? Of open source software, and that's really where I've gone, right? I've taken the experience that I have in data. We've gone to big data, leverage a lot of the things in data science, and now just luckily AI and ML is really a thing today as well as big data. So that's kind of how I got to where I am.
That's so cool. I think that's a perfect background for someone like you. And I was amazed when I heard your OKRs when you first started to tell me about your OKRs right now as an engineering director. And tell us more about them.
Sure. I mean, I think when I think about I guess spending so much time right in sort of as an individual contributor or as someone that's really in the weeds, I had a lot of time to think about what I wanted out of my manager. And so three things kind of came to mind. I would say they're overarching philosophies, right? The first one is act like an owner, and I'll dive into that a little bit more. The second one is everything we do is a superlative. I call it everything we do is EST, right? Okay. The best, the coolest, the cheapest, the smartest. And then the last thing is, as managers, as leaders, we want to develop world-class celebrity engineers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's dive into the first one. That's
okay. So we talk about acting like an owner, and I think this is a very, I would say, Silicon Valley mentality, right? In Silicon Valley, there's a couple of things that are really unique here, and I recently got a chance to drive all around the country. And what you quickly realize is that there's lots of schools that teach Java and C++, and there's computer science guys everywhere. Why would any company be crazy enough to set up an office in the most expensive place probably in the world, right? You can find these skill sets all over. And the reason why is because Silicon Valley has a unique culture to cultivate what I call an intrapreneur, right? So these are entrepreneurs who are working inside of a company as an employee, but they operate like an owner, and they have a lot of autonomy. And they measure themselves by, I would say, a different measuring stick. So a lot of times, instead of saying, you can't do this, you can't do that, here's the guardrails, right? You tell people, look, act like an owner. Act as if you own the business. And a lot of times, just everything comes together when they get that picture in their head. They begin to think about things like, well, how am I going to measure my customers' happiness? Maybe that's an internal customer. They begin to think about things like, well, if it's my money, how would I want to spend this money on costs? Costs become much more complex, right? It's not just about, well, I lowered my AWS bill. It's start having interesting conversations with software engineers like, if this was my company, I might consider buying a piece of software because my time to market is faster. Or maybe in this scenario, I think we can use an open source piece of software and make the investment. The mentality and the thinking is so much more long-term and deep and healthy for the business when you can get people to really act like an owner.
Yeah, and while I agree 100% with you, this can get so messy, right? If everyone is acting like an owner, and those guardrails that you mentioned are really fuzzy, that gets really messy. So how you handle that?
Well, I mean, there's different levels, right? So in the beginning, you have there's an old book called Situational Leadership, right? And you have to nurture people through these levels. When someone comes out of school, they want proper guidance. They don't want to act like an owner. They're more like an apprentice, right? An apprentice, like I'm going to make shoes. I'm going to show you how to make shoes, and you just do what I tell you to do. As they grow up in the process, they begin to learn, right? And that's our investment. I'll talk to you about that a little bit later, what I call the fuzzy factor. But a lot of developing high-performing engineering organizations is about investing in them, not as labor robots, like I hired you just because you know a syntax that I don't. It's about investing in them, and that takes some time. And like you said, I mean, if when you start off, the guardrails are pretty tight, and it's almost micromanaging. But people like proper guidance. It's only after they get knowledge and the investment from their managers and that trust in themselves that it's okay to fail that they can begin to spread their wings and take risks and act like owners and get feedback and improve themselves.
Do you really think it's just here in Bay Area?
I don't think it's here in the Bay Area, but I think it's definitely the most prevalent in tech. Tech, I think, has started that revolution. I've looked at some other industries, and I don't think it's as prevalent as it is in tech.
And how does this kind of behavior impacts the output of an engineering team?
Well, I think one of the things that it allows us to do is go faster. Engineering typically, if you look back at engineering, was very waterfall based, and waterfall is really designed around the principles of let's measure twice, cut once, right? And we've since then, because of sort of the where we've gone technologically, you look at modern companies like Facebook and Netflix. I mean, these guys are putting out releases probably hundreds or thousands of times a day, right? And some of them don't work. And so this concept of moving fast with courage, allowing people to fail but know how to fix things, is I think very, very center and critical to I would say Silicon Valley. It started in the software industry and it's moved out. But that's very opposite from the traditional software development, where if something goes wrong, I'm going to measure you on uptime. and I'm going to measure you on accuracy. And if you mess that up, you're fired. So what that does is it ends up breeding the opposite of what you want, right? It's all about stability, and you lose speed and agility when you incentivize behaviors that way.
So it's not only about the guardrails, it's also about, making sure that the infrastructure and the software is ready, anti-fragile, ready for failures, right?
Absolutely. So having a proper, like a CI/CD pipeline and the proper testing in place, I think that's critical. And then the other thing that I'll talk about sort of in the last one, which is my last thing about developing world-class celebrity engineers, is it's about making people feel secure, financially secure, so that they feel like they can do the best work and take some appropriate risks as if it were their business to take risks with.
Okay, so let's dive now into EST.
Right. So I think when we're doing engineering projects, one of the things people get wrong about engineers is they think that we're robots. We're very mechanical people, right? But engineers, like everybody, I would even say almost like artists, right? They want the ability to do something great, right? At least the A-level players. Everybody wants it. That's not just engineers. That's universal. And you have to give engineers that ability. So if you develop an environment where it's all about code to spec, okay, if I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. This kind of a mentality, tops down, right?
Yeah.
Then you're not getting the best out of your engineers. So one of the things that I try to do is incentivize them to say, look, whatever you're doing, think about it in terms of a superlative. I want it to be the coolest thing you've ever seen in your life, like you personally think it's awesome, or I want you to think it's great because, like, I had an engineer come to me, one of the site reliability engineers, they go, oh my gosh, you'll never believe this. I freaking was looking at our AWS bill. I'm going to save us $40,000 a month because I found a way to optimize this. So the ability to give people the chance to shine in one of the superlatives is what I call it. The coolest, the best, the most awesomest, right? Whatever you want to call it, is I think critical to keeping that motivation on your team and getting the best out of these super smart and very expensive engineers that you're paying.
Yeah, but I can see a problem with that. Like, brand new database that just appeared on Hacker News is a really cool thing,
Right.
and I as an engineer would like to use it, but then it's kind of unsustainable for a company to have like a lot of chunks of cool untested things that have no support. So how do you kind of deal with that?
That's an awesome question. You're right. I mean, it's a big, large moving machine, and the question is, can you have cats running all different directions? How are you going to herd them all in? We have something here called plussing, and this is something that I absolutely encourage all the engineers to do, which is, look, build your brand, build yourself, build your skills, stay relevant, and help the company as well while you're acting like an owner. If you think that there's a way to refactor this code from, let's say, Postgres to a key value store like Dynamo or Cassandra, try it. Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of time, but if you're motivated, show me something EST, and I'm gonna give you the stage, even if you're not an architect, to convince the architecture team that we need to begin to build this into our products, right? So I've had most of our new architecture has come from plussing projects that people have tried out. They've seen a better way. Because here's the thing, architects can't know everything. There's only a couple of guys, right? So the guys that know the best JavaScript frameworks, for example, are the guys using JavaScript, right? The guys that know the best let's say the best Java stuff are the guys writing the Java. You have to give them an opportunity to present that and a platform to present that to, let's say, an architectural committee that can allow things to flow through. And then the second thing that you have to do is you have to give that architectural committee a chance to move in refactoring and agility into sort of your common development process. So for us, we have a funny saying. We say, the architecture is only good for 2 weeks, and next sprint it might change. And that's because we give the architects a chance to refactor some of to take some of these ideas. There's a pipeline that's open for the architects to ask for refactoring of code from one architecture to another, and that really does come from the bottoms up.
Man, this is rad. And I wonder, your team is known for doing this quick, fast prototypes of things, and maybe this is just good for this type of teams and not for all of the teams out there, right?
I think I would agree with that up until maybe a few years ago.
Okay.
But one of the things that has happened is the move to the cloud has really been a game changer. It has forced us to change the way that we think about our infrastructure. In the old days, we'd go out there, let's say you're an IT organization, you'd think about a decision very, very hard. Oh, do I get Oracle ERP or do I get SAP, right? And you'd make this decision knowing that this technology is going to stay in place for 20 or 30 years. And it's probably going to take 3 CIOs to put it in, right? You fire the first 2 and the last one gets it in. Well, nowadays with cloud, we're moving almost towards infrastructure as a service, right? And this has changed the paradigm of how we think about development and how long we believe a piece of infrastructure is going to live. In a very extreme case, right? There is no infrastructure, right? You get things like Lambda functions, and it's literally serverless. But one of the good examples about this is that if you're not willing to refactor and leverage the latest and greatest in terms of cloud technologies, you're probably gonna die. And let me give you an example of this. When I first got here, this is only a little over 3 years ago, we were doing a big data project. And we were ingesting a lot of data from sensor data, anonymous sensor data from some of our clients. Billions of records were coming in. And we had put a Cloudera cluster on EC2 instances in Amazon. And that seemed to work pretty well. We were ingesting the data. It was Hadoop. That was what was modern at the time. And then we said, wow, we need to do analytics. The modern thing to do analytics on at that time was something called Impala. That was also Cloudera. So we said, okay, I guess we need to move the data between these 2 clusters. We created a separate Impala cluster. There's sort of an analytics cluster and more of an HDFS like MapReduce cluster. And we're kind of going happily on our way. Now, let me hit the fast forward button. If we had never refactored away from that technology, I went into the AWS calculator, and at our data volumes, with the amount that we process and the amount of records that we're storing, which is over 3 trillion records in our data store, we would, and we continued to march along our way in EC2 instances on demand the way that we were. If we had never optimized, our AWS bill would have come in at over $6 billion a year. So it's obviously not sustainable, right? So as you evolve, this whole notion of refactoring, cloud optimization, cloud architecture, it's actually critical to the success of your company, really, your product and your company, your platform. Whereas probably 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was not a thought, right? It was like you implement it, you set it, you forget it, you vertically scale it. That's just the way that things were. And today, there's a whole new paradigm around that.
Well, let me give you a counterexample from 4 years ago.
Sure.
I was leader of a team, and cloud was already there. We were fully AWS/Google Cloud, and one of the engineers brought this idea of using Rethink the DB. At the time, it was cutting edge, just arrived on the market, and I was so worried. Now, when I onboard a new developer, I have to teach him how to use Rethink the DB. We have to pass this knowledge onto him. We have to pass the knowledge to all the folks, because only one guy is now involved in figuring out how Rethink the DB works.
Right.
And it's cutting edge. It still have bugs. It will lose data. And maybe someday it will lose support because company will go out of business. Guess what? It did. So
Right.
so like and with like products like software as a service, this kind of parts of infrastructure, even if in cloud, they tend to live like for years. And often there is no need to refactor them. They are just good as they are, and you can just move on and create new features and build new features instead of constantly refactoring everything. So what do you think about that?
Well, if there's no need to refactor, then I don't think you should refactor. But I love, just the ability to try. Again, right, you have to set expectations, right? So if I was talking with your Rethink DB guy, I'd say, all right, well, here you go. Let's act like an owner. Let's pretend you own this business. You own this engineering organization. I think it's fantastic. Let's try it. Let's POC it. Let's talk about, how easy is this to use? What problems does it solve? And then I want you to sit with some of the other engineers and tell me what the ramp up is for them. Maybe you're the smartest guy in the building by 2 or 3 fold, but if you can't get other people to follow you, then I want you to again act like an owner and think about what you would do. Right now, the funny thing is, I had the exact same situation. I have this guy who's super ambitious, and we were doing everything in Java, and he goes, "This is old school, okay." All right, I'm a millennial. We do functional program. It's Scala now. So we're like, okay, try it. Right? So he went ahead and tried it. I said, look, I need you to act like an owner. Go ahead and try it. I appreciate you doing this, kind of a plussing project. He delivered a little module, and I said, now I want you to know, I want you to try it, but I also want you to think about how everyone else is going to pick this up. I want you to sit down with a couple of other developers because you are an owner, right? And eventually he came back. He said, Scala was great. I loved it. But it's so hard to train some of these other guys. I don't think we can make that move. And he ended up refactoring that back into Java. Not that we don't have any Scala anywhere, but he ended up refactoring some of that into Java. But he didn't get disheartened because he felt like he could try things. And I didn't say no to him. He said no to himself. Right? Yeah. And later on, he ended up trying, I think he tried Node.js. He moved some of the APIs over to Node.js and Lambdas. That one actually worked out. And so I think life in a startup is a series of experiments, trials and failures, trials and failures. It's not a series of successes that you build on each other. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but that's like the fun of it. Right? And you have to give people the ability to see from above. And if they see that, most people will make high quality decisions.
So like your first OKR was like act like an owner, then everything best.
EST,
like
yeah.
EST, right? And then the third one?
The last one is a little weird, but I like to say I'm trying to build world-class celebrity engineers. Now, what does that mean? It's unlikely that I can offer you, unless I'm a startup company, right? It's unlikely that I'm going to offer you financial independence. So what's the next best thing? Well, if you go around the country, a lot of people like the word job security. The problem with job security is it's tied to your job. What if you hate your job, right? What if you piss off your boss? Well, now you don't have job security. So what I try to work on is, and I know this sounds counterintuitive, but what I try to work on is what I call personal professional security. That means if I can help you to build your brand and build like EST projects, I get some meat on the bones of your career, and I can help you as an engineer to do some amazing things and also get you out there, whether it be white papers, blogs, patents, talks, podcasts, things like this. What I've done for you is give you the security knowing you don't need this job. You can have a job like this anywhere. And that sounds counterintuitive because you go, well, so now you're helping your engineers leave your company? And the answer to that is absolutely. I want my engineers getting a call from a recruiter every single day of the week. That is my goal. If we do that, then I believe it's validation that we have hired the best. Now, sometimes you can't afford to hire the best, but you can always afford to develop them into world-class engineers. And I think that's a lot of my biggest measuring stick for myself being in management is sort of the legacy that I leave behind. I used to coach volleyball, and one of there's two ways to measure volleyball coaches, or any coach, sports coach, right? One is your win-loss ratio. That's obvious. That's like projects delivered in engineering. But the second way you measure a coach's success is the notable athletes that you've produced, right? And so I look at that for myself. I go, look, who are the notable engineers that I've produced who have been under my management? And so that's where I try and get that. I want to get everyone into the thought process of I'm doing something awesome because Darren is going to help build my personal professional brand. He's going to help me with my public brand on the internet. He's going to help me with blogs. He's going to help me with patents. He wants me to be able to go wherever I want. And ironically, because I'm doing that, they generally stay. That's the irony, because I think they say, well, I could go over here and get more, but you know what, you're treating me pretty good, so maybe I won't go.
Who will help me so much?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really nice approach, and that's not the first time I'm hearing this. It's a great advice. You mentioned this fuzzy factor. Could we talk about this a bit more?
Sure. So the fuzzy factor is something that I invented because it was not clear to, for example, Scrum Masters or product managers on how they can best interact with the engineers. So what was happening was that there's just so much prescriptive, either the stories were too high level or they were so prescriptive, it was like, do this exactly like this, and there's just no wiggle room. Do it exactly this way. So it was just a communication problem. I recognized that. And so what I did was I started asking product managers, hey, look, just tell us what you want. We'll put it down, and we will put in our own stories. Okay, you can put in epics, but we'll put in our own stories, and we'll acknowledge that we want to do this work. But I'm going to have the engineers, in a nice way, write a fuzzy factor in there. 10, ultra fuzzy, I acknowledge you want me to do that, but I have no freaking clue what you're talking about. And a 3 is crystal clear. I know exactly how to do what you are asking, and I don't need any more information. Now this signals a couple of things, right? The first one is it signals to the Scrum Masters who have unfortunately a bad reputation of just being irritating and asking people if they're done, to look at that fuzzy factor and say, wow, let me look at all the 10s and I know exactly what I need to do. I need to call a lot of meetings right now because information needs to go from the product guys into the brains of the engineers. There's an investment of information and meetings that need to take place. If it's down to a 5, maybe you just ask them, do you need some whiteboard sessions? We facilitate information going from to the engineer, right, from wherever is needed. Once the fuzzy factor gets down to like a 4 or a 3, and depending on the seniority of the person, the Scrum Masters, the product managers or owners, they know, back off. This person knows exactly what to do. You're just annoying them, okay, if you go and ask them and start talking with them again. And what's cool about it is that the goal is really drive the fuzzy factor down. If it's super high, maybe we have a spike, right, so that we can drive it down. But I say 3 because there's some room to go down to a 2, a 1, and a 0. And what is that? That is the ability for the engineer to begin to replay, and you start getting the benefits, right, as a product manager of you've invested information in me, now I'm gonna blow your mind and like surprise and delight. And that comes in the form of like a demo day, right? So now the information flow reverses. It was to the engineer, and now the information flow reverses and it goes from the engineer out. And that's like one of my favorite quotes from Steve Jobs, right, is he says, you don't hire smart people and tell them what to do. You hire smart people so they can tell you what to do. So the fuzzy factor is really just a simple way of figuring out how to get enough information to the engineers so that they can tell us what to do, because they're in the code. They're the smart guys.
Can you give an example of such a situation?
Well, let me give you a silly example that I used. That I used. Just it kind of illustrates the way that we were sort of misfiring with each other. So the silly example is, you get called into, let's say the CEO's office. He goes, hey, or let's say the CIO's, hey, there's a email that's coming into me, has this attachment. I need you to take this attachment, save it in this folder. That's all I need you to do. Write a script to do that. Now, in his mind, he's thinking, fuzzy factor 3. That's obvious. I just showed you what to do. That's no problem. The engineer is going, oh my God, man. That's a 10, man. That's so fuzzy. I have no idea what you're talking about. And so there's frustration. What are you talking about? Look at this, okay? Open email, attachment, drag, drop, done. Like, are you dumb, right? So they start thinking, it starts getting nasty at that point. So what happens is he puts a fuzzy factor 10. Now that gives him an opportunity to talk, right? Ask questions. Okay, interesting. All right, so you want me to, okay, so what is the email box that this comes in? How big is the file? What time does it come in? What kind of data is in there? What format is it in? Is it PII? Do I need to encrypt it? How often will this come in? Does it come in on weekends? What happens if it doesn't come in? Is there a distribution list that I should look? Because engineers think about this thing totally differently, right? I mean, they are totally different. And at some point, the fuzzy factor begins to come down. Now that begins to flip once he goes, I got it. I know exactly what you're talking about, everything. Now what happens is, if he's an A player, he's gonna come back and go, guess what? Kuba, I got your solution. You told me to do this. Let me show you something. Are you sitting down? Yep. Okay, watch this. I've set up this email box with this address. It's going to be monitored. When it comes in, I will know if it doesn't come in by 8 a.m. And if it doesn't come in by 8 a.m., you'll get a pager duty. I've also created an integration to Zendesk. It's going to create a ticket. And not only that, there's another distribution list. In addition to that, I've also created some other integration to these other places where we can not only get the file, but it'll also load it into a database so you can easily query it. And at this point, you're going, oh my God, I literally thought, I just told you to save this file, but dude, you're blowing me away. That's the opportunity for an engineer to like surprise and delight. And that's what keeps these guys going. That's the entrepreneur in them.
Yeah, that sounds great. And option A is like they are delighted. Option B is I didn't need that, right? Sometimes it's like that. So how is there like a frustration there in a software engineer when he's trying to delight and he made a mistake and it was not needed?
I would say that's rare. That would be rare because most people. It's I would say 99 times out of 10 it's like 99 times out of 100 it's always like you did exactly what I said but you forgot this part or it fails, right? Is it possible that people are not impressed? Absolutely, but again we act like owners, right? And if you really study entrepreneur principles of today, you coach these people, it's like, you know what? A lot of this stuff is sort of like this build, measure, learn feedback loop, right? And, things like that can happen maybe the first 6 months that you're working with a new stakeholder or you're brand new in the company. But as you build these small things, you measure the feedback and you learn. And we build, measure, learn, success, fail, right? It's like a reinforcement model. And, okay. After about 6 months, if you'll just stick with it, Kuba, you know what? We'll be in sync, and you're going to start delivering awesomeness. Yeah, because that's part of the process, and that's about acting like an owner. It's that entrepreneurial spirit. It's that willingness, wanting to surprise and delight, and knowing that not everything that you do will get hit out of the park, but I would say 9 times out of 10 you're going to get at least a base hit.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wanted to hear more about about your team, what you actually do, and some stories about your Navy SEALs like actions.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So I started off here as Team Darren, team of one, and I built up the data science and engineering team, and that's about 25 people now. And then along the way, I acquired the web engineering team. It was actually the web development team. I'll tell you about that team. That was a very cool team. Not that I'm great at web development, but I acquired that team. And then we acquired sort of the platform and this intelligent platforms team that does like license management. We do identity management, things like a front-facing My Account or My Profile. And then we do all of like the updates. So it's a pretty cool team, everything from data to web to internal platforms and infrastructure. I think your question to me was like, what are some of the cool things that they've done? The data science and engineering team has been largely, up until about maybe a year ago, was focused entirely on internal analytics and data science. So ingesting huge amounts of data, providing tremendous insights, and really helping to build out like our, what I would call threat marketing. Threat marketing, as well as supporting some of the malware intelligence. They've built out amazing infrastructure that they've probably refactored about 4 times. For all the way from Cloudera to now we're on things like Kafka. We run like a batch ingestion pipeline through, it streams through Kafka. We have custom Java frameworks. We run our Hadoop clusters now for only about 6 hours a day. We leverage a lot of AWS technologies in that team. We just implemented Cassandra for some of the new streaming technologies. And about a year ago, the team was so successful and just was seen as these wonderful entrepreneurs. They were really recognized by the CEO and the SVP of engineering. They said, we think you guys are so good, we want you to work on our product. And that was really a compliment to a team that typically only does analytics, right? Analytics and data science internally. But they've managed to deliver the platform that's our flagship product, which is called EPR. And this is a platform to do behavioral detections in real time. And they also are delivering on analytics, like all the customer-facing analytics and the streaming ingestion of those and parsing. They do that as well. The web team, I'll just brag about the web team a little bit. They've made some amazing progress because they're probably one of the oldest engineering teams outside of our product in Malwarebytes. That's how we sold our product, right? On the web, Yep. So they were really suffering from sort of the legacy that they grew up in, which was just web development. You give me a design, I will develop a page. You give me another design, I'll develop a page. Maybe 2 pages, one in French, one in English, right? And it just became unmanageable. It was like the team was scaling linearly. We had 1,600 pages to our website and all of these places that we were building blogs and pillar pages, etc. And I challenged the team. I said, listen, I'm going to bring you in here. You're no longer, they were actually part of marketing. Now you're part of engineering. And I want you to think like an engineer. I want you to do these 3 things, act like an owner, EST, and I want to develop a world-class celebrity engineer. So what can you do to alleviate this problem of just building web pages over and over and over? And they kind of came up, they said, well, we could build a CMS, but that would never work. It's so complicated. Well, I challenged them, and they originally their thought was like, well, what do you think we should do? And the correct answer to that is, I don't know. You tell me. You're the expert. So they actually went through, and they're like, am I allowed to do that? You're not allowed to do it. You have to do it. I'm not going to give you the ideas. I'm just going to tell you what we need. You have to give me the ideas. They came up with a beautiful custom content management system that works specifically for Malwarebytes. It's cloud architected, cloud optimized, and we've literally converted over the entire website. All the A/B testing, everything has been done in like 6 months.
Oh, that's fast.
It's like unbelievable what this team has done. and we've converted them from what I call like page developers into web platform engineers. And they are on their way to, in my mind, celebrity, world-class engineers. I told them, I want to get you guys, sharing about this. Let's talk about the technologies, the tech stack that you custom built in order to make this work. They are energized because they got a chance to do something great, and it was their idea, not mine. You asked me about Navy SEALs, I think, right?
Yeah, I remember some story that you told me, but we talked like 3 months ago, and you told me some story that you prototyped something like really quick, like for the whole company, and you delighted, like your team delighted actually.
Yeah.
All the other part of the company. So.
Well, we always have these sort of special operations teams that some of them are permanent. A couple of them are that are led by architects, and some of them are plussing projects. But I think one of the things to consider in engineering is that there's always this. I talk about all these entrepreneurial things. Let's go crazy. But the reality is that engineering is, if you're in a company that has revenue, it is a balancing act between exploring the next innovation and exploiting the technology that you have and collecting money, right? So it's always this trade-off between explore and exploit, and there's some kind of a split there. And the analogy that I use is, it's funny because we usually think about the government and how inefficient the government is, and private corporations could do it better, maybe, I don't know. But one of the efficient pieces of government that I've always been impressed with is military. Now, you look at military, and you go, this is an enormous organization, enormous, right? So many people, but for some reason, whether you agree with it or not, right? They are able to accomplish missions, right? Be it large scale or tactical. And what they've done is they've sort of created these special operations teams like Navy SEALs. So now there's places for new ideas and reconnaissance, right? Information gathering to go, right? If I said, hey, I want you to get me some information, right, on this person of interest, if you went to the Army and you asked them that, they would literally be, okay, no problem. Where is he? Oh, okay, he's in Cuba. No problem. They're going to come over there with their construction crew, building roads, tanks, all these kind of crazy things, setting up a city to occupy, right? And by that time, that person of interest is probably gone, right? The opportunity has evaporated. So what the government realizes, well, let's create these special ops teams, and they can just get in, get out. Maybe it's a 20-minute mission to just gather some information to build, measure, and learn, right? That feedback loop. And if it makes sense, hey, hold the high ground, the Army's coming in behind you. But sometimes it's well, yeah, we looked and really there's nothing there. But at least we only spent 5 people's time, not 1,000 people's time, and 3 months. So we try to employ that model. Frankly speaking, we don't do as much exploration as we'd all like to do 100% exploration, right? But that's being in a startup company. I think we probably do 20% exploratory type stuff, and that can be in the form of new technologies. It can be in the form of POCs that are customer facing, new features, and the other 80% of our time really has to be around exploiting the technologies that our customers absolutely love and being responsive to what they want. There's bugs in the field, we've got to be able to address those, and that's really the mainline Army.
And does this 3 translate to engineering team, this military parallel? It's are they acting like owners? No, they're executing orders, right? It's
That's true. It's not exactly a parallel, but I think the parallel is the way that you think about distributing work, right? There is sort of a backlog that we create that's really more, I would say, feature requests that's driven by the product team and the customers, feedback that we get, and that has to go through the appropriate infrastructure, rigor, QA, right, and the site reliability engineering processes in order to deliver to the level of excellence that our customers are paying for. There's this other side that's more like a hackathon, right? Does it have to be perfect? No, but I want to see if it works, right? Let's go try Druid. Let's go try Kafka. Let's go try Flink, right? Let's try something. It doesn't have to be perfect, and we certainly don't need to push it through the machine, this beautiful, well-oiled machine that is engineering, that's going to, engineer things for EST, right? Like amazing uptime. That's not part of the equation in exploration and incubation, right? So that's kind of how I think about it. You're right, though. I mean, we don't want to be militaristic in terms of like how we execute, but I think in terms of the way we think about, is this an operational thing, or is this an exploratory mission? I really think about dividing the teams that way.
Yeah, I really love, like, this is kind of like a hacker culture, and really a culture that is optimized for developer happiness in a way, because of the the light thing that you said, and ability to explore new things and new technologies. And I see this as a tremendous way, like great way to inspire people, right?
Right. I think that's my goal. I don't think it's ever once you get into management, your perspective changes. And it's interesting because I tell people, before you get into management, you definitely should fight for yourself and ask for raises and promotions. Once you get into management, you need to ask for other people to get raises and promotions. You will get promoted because they have to promote you, right? So one of my managers says, well, how do I get promoted to senior manager? And I said, build an organization of managers, and then we have to promote you, right? Because I can't have a manager managing managers, right? He goes, oh, okay, well, how about director? Well, then build an organization of senior managers. I'll promote you to director. So if you're constantly in the process of building up other people and just making them shine, and you're a background guy, you're the director of NASA, you're not Armstrong stepping on the moon, you're not in the spotlight anymore, I think you'll be pretty successful in terms of engineering management.
Doesn't this mean that you should actually fight for others, like from the beginning, right? Like,
yes.
Even when you're software engineer, you should still fight for others, and
It's always a win for you, right?
Yeah.
If you fight for others, I think there's a lot of sort of the tendency is to feel like you need to fight for your career. I think that one of the greatest things about management is the ability to fight for other people's career, to be their attorney, right? And go to bat for them. And I tell them, look, I can't guarantee you, but I think you deserve it. And I'd love to freaking fight for it. I don't know if this company will do it, but you need to know that I'm on your side.
I think that's a lovely message for every aspiring leader out there that is listening to us. Thank you so much for being here and
thanks for having
talking
me
to us. Thank you.
Cool.
Hey,
All right.
that was
Thanks.
Amazing. That was
Was
so
it?
good.
Thank you. Well,
Thank you.
I hope that was okay.